You're listening to Mr. Thursday Night. Now here's Brett Gombita.
7-1-1 on the year, 3-0 in the regular season. The next challenge awaits Seahawks Cardinals on this week's episode of Mr. Thursday Night. I'm Brett Gombita, episode 7, week 4 of the NFL regular season. But we start with a recap of week 3, the Bills taking down the Dolphins 31-21. Early on in this one, the Dolphins proved they weren't going to be a slouch. Ollie Gordon scored his first career touchdown to put the Dolphins up 7-0. Then the Bills responded with 2 tight end touchdowns. Dalton Kincaid and Jackson Hawes made it 14-7 Buffalo, but Miami evened it up at 14 right before the half on a 16-play drive, ending in a Jalen Waddle touchdown. Then in the third quarter, James Cook scored the only touchdown, only points in the quarter. Tyreek Hill tied it up early in the fourth at 21. Then Khalil Shakir scored what ended up being the game-winning touchdown, making it 28-21 Bills. But the Dolphins were driving at the end of this game, looking to tie the game, but on the ninth play of the drive, Tua Tagovailoa was intercepted by Terrell Bernard, allowing Matt Prater to ice the game. 31-21 Bills win. I predicted a bigger blowout than that. I get the win, though. I'm 3-0 on the year. And your Mr. Thursday Night Player of the Week, well, we just mentioned him a minute ago, the third defensive player in a row to win the award, Terrell Bernard. 7 tackles in the game, a pass deflection, but the game-sealing interception to set up the field goal to make it a 10-point game. 3 weeks into the season, a defensive player has won this award every week. We'll see who it can be this week on Seahawks Cardinals. Looking back at last week, everyone that put in picks correctly predicted the Bills. Benicio, you didn't win this week. Benicio won the first 2 weeks for closest score. This week it was another tie, this time between Anthony DeFilippo and Tyler Aaron. Flip, as we like to call him, Anthony DeFilippo, 35-21 was his prediction. So he gets the Dolphins total right, off by 4 points on the Bills side. And then Tyler Aaron, 31-17, he gets the Buffalo part right, off by 4 on the Miami part. So both of them were off by 4 total. They win last week's score prediction challenge. We'll stay with last week as we recap last week's fantasy starts and sits. It was a great week. When I mention the first guy's name, it won't sound like we're off to a good start, but I promise it gets hot after that. Dak Prescott. He was my QB start. He threw 2 picks in the game. First one was not his fault. Then he got benched for Joe Milton in garbage time, and Joe Milton came in and threw an interception as well. Dak Prescott, QB 18 so far this year, not off to a hot start. I got faith in him, though. I'm 3-0 in one of my leagues, and my starting QB's Dak. I might not be 3-0 because of him, but he's on the team. He's doing his job, I guess. My QB to bench last week was Tua Tagovailoa. 21 points, that's more than I expected Miami to score in the game, but Tua fell short of his fantasy projection, so I'm 1 for 2 so far, if you're keeping score at home. James Cook was my start, 22 touches, 20.8 fantasy points. Yes, he beat his projection. My sit was Ashton Genty. He has yet to beat his fantasy projection. It will come soon, though. I believe it will come soon. Didn't do it this past weekend, so 3 for 4 so far. Khalil Shakir beat his projection for the first time this year. I had him as my wide receiver start. And my wide receiver sit, I had DK Metcalf, who has had back-to-back 3-catch, 1-touchdown performances. But that's not enough, and DK Metcalf did fall short of his projection this past weekend. Dalton Kincaid was my tight end to start. He had his most receptions he's had in a game so far this season, with 5, to go along with a touchdown. And when you do that, you're probably going to beat your projection, and he did. And TJ Hawkinson, I doubted him. I did say I think Carson Wentz could be the difference. Still said to sit him, though. And Hawkinson did beat his projected total, so Wentz was the difference. So in that sequence there, I got Dak wrong, and I got Hawkinson wrong. But the 6 guys in between, I got correct. 6 for 8 on starts and sits. Best one of the year so far. Hopefully we can keep that up into this week's starts and sits, where oddly enough, both Thursday night quarterbacks, Kyler Murray and Sam Darnold, are projected to score 18.63 points on Sleeper. Both the same projected total. My QB start, I went with Kyler Murray. I just think you have to for the rushing upside, and hopefully Marvin Harrison has a bounce-back week for him. The QB sit, I'm not going to give a specific name here. I'm more going to name a team the 49ers quarterback this weekend versus the Jaguars. If it's Brock Purdy, he's going to be shaky in his first game back. If it's Mac Jones, I don't think he's going to perform. He didn't quite perform last week, how he did against the Saints 2 weeks prior. The running back start for this week, Trey Benson. No James Conner. Prayers for a speedy recovery there. Means Trey Benson should get the rock quite a lot in this game, unless they split his carries with another back, but I think Trey Benson should tote the rock quite a lot in this game. And my running back sit might be surprising to some, but it's a guy who's fumbled the ball 3 times in the last 3 weeks. Derrick Henry against the Chiefs. I think the Ravens are going to be in more passing situations in this game. There's going to be more passing downs. And with that, Derrick Henry goes to the sideline. Justice Hill is in the game. So I don't think they'll take Henry's workload away because he's fumbled, but I just think the Ravens are going to look to pass more in this game, and that'll lead to less times that Henry's on the field. At wide receiver, Cooper Kupp is my start. I think Darnold is just going to look for him more this week. Playing a divisional opponent, Kupp's familiar with this team, being that he's played his whole career in that NFC West. At wide receiver sit, it's a guy who's disappointed in all 3 weeks so far, has yet to put up double-digit fantasy points. Brian Thomas Jr. Maybe I'm cursing him by putting him here. Maybe that'll help the Brian Thomas owners out there, but for now, he's my wide receiver sit against the 49ers. My tight end start is going to be Trey McBride. Really the only option here. He's actually the highest projected tight end of the week, and I don't want to pick for or against A.J. Barner or Elijah Arroyo with my new rule this year that I have to pick a Thursday night player at one of the positions. So I don't want to pick against either one of those guys, so I just figured why not? We'll start Trey McBride. He's the highest projected tight end of the week. And for my sit, I'm going with a guy who had 1 catch in week 1, 1 catch in week 2. He might have had a monster performance on Monday Night Football last night. Mark Andrews. If Isaiah Likely returns, I think Mark Andrews will be looked for less by Lamar Jackson, leading for me to believe that he should be sat this week in fantasy. So Kyler Murray as my start, 49ers QB as my sit, Trey Benson running back start, Derrick Henry running back sit, Cooper Kupp as the wide receiver start, Brian Thomas Jr. as the wide receiver sit, Trey McBride to start at tight end, and Mark Andrews, my tight end sit. Let's go 8 for 8. I say that every week. Don't know if it's possible. 6 for 8 is pretty good. Why not 7? And there are a few local ties in this game. Seahawks, Cardinals, starting on the Seattle side. Long snapper Chris Stoll went to Penn State University. Gotta love the long snappers. There's a few long snappers in the NFL with WPO connections. Cal Adamitis, Christian Kuntz, to name a couple more. And then Seattle also has former Steelers wide receiver Cody White. Got called up to the active roster not that long ago. Former Michigan Stater as well. And on the Cardinals, you got a guy, it seems like it was forever ago that he played on the Steelers, but he's still in the league. Offensive lineman Kelvin Beachum is who I'm referring to. Been on the Cardinals for quite some time. He was on the Steelers when I was in elementary school, and I'm a junior in college now. Got James Conner as well. Prayers for a speedy recovery there once again. And then a couple of Penn State guys, the punter Blake Gilligan and P.J. Mustipher, defensive lineman. Both Seattle and Arizona are 2-1. They've got there in different ways though, and we'll start with Seattle. A 17-13 week 1 loss to the 49ers. That was before the 49ers caught the injury bug, although Kittle did go down in the game and Purdy was out for the weeks to follow. Looking at week 2, they beat the Steelers 31-17. Caleb Johnson helped out a lot there by botching the kickoff. Former Ashton Genty backup in college, George Halani, recovered the fumble for a touchdown. He was almost the Mr. Thursday Night Player of the Week earlier in the year during the preseason, funny enough. And in week 3, a 44-13 win for the Seahawks over the New Orleans Saints. 38 first-half points in the game for the Seattle Seahawks. They were my survivor pool pick in this game. 2 out of the 3 weeks so far, I've just picked the team that's playing against the Saints. I don't know if I'm going to pick the Buffalo Bills this week. That's who the Saints play. Might want to save the Bills for later down the road. We'll figure it out, though. Looking at the Cardinals, how did they get to 2-1? Every single one of these games came down to the final play. 20-13 week 1 win over the Saints. Came down to the final play. Saints had a chance to score a touchdown. Week 2 versus Carolina. Came down to the final play. Carolina turned it over on downs, and the Cardinals just kneeled on it one time to end the game. So technically it didn't come down to the final play. We'll go with the penultimate play, I guess. And in week 3, a game-winning field goal for the 49ers to hand the Cardinals their first loss, which happened on the final play of the game. I don't think the Cardinals are going to lose on the final play of the game this week. Stay tuned for my pick, though. Here we'll be making it in just a few minutes. But first, here are some numbers on the matchup and an overall preview. Looking at some of the guys injured, Nick Eamon is doubtful. He's missed the last 2 games, the rookie safety. Running back Zach Charbonnet is questionable. He missed last week. For Arizona, defensive back Will Johnson is doubtful. Wide receiver Zay Jones is out. The over-under for the game, 43.5. Seattle is 1.5 point favorites. Looking at the matchups in 2024, both were Kyler versus Geno Smith now with the Raiders. 16-6 Seahawks and 30-18 Seahawks. And not only did Seattle sweep the season series last year, they've won the last 7 games they've played against the Cardinals. All-time matchup history, Seahawks have 29 wins to the Cardinals 22 and 1 tie, but the Seahawks have won the last 7 in a row. And speaking of that tie, funny enough, Sunday Night Football 2016, 6-6 final, if anyone remembers that. Few shanked field goals at the end. Seahawks did have a tie earlier this preseason, which is why I'm 7-1-1, if you think back to what I said in my intro. Funny little nugget there. But since I mentioned that Geno Smith started both of those games last year for the Seahawks, you guys are probably curious what Sam Darnold has done in his career versus the Cardinals. He's 1-0 as a starter against the Cardinals, and that came last year with the Vikings, a 23-22 win over the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray, on the other hand, 2-8 versus the Seahawks, and since the Seahawks have won 7 in a row, it means Kyler hasn't won since 2020 against the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks this year on the road are 1-0. The Cardinals this year at home are 1-0. The home team is undefeated in Thursday Night Football 2025. But I'm going to say that changes this week. Give me the Seahawks 23-16. Given Kyler Murray's history against the Seahawks, it doesn't bode well for them in this matchup. Seattle's had more convincing wins this season so far as well. Mentioned that all the Cardinals' wins have come on the last second, as well as their loss to the 49ers. And they weren't playing quality teams there. I mean, you let the game against the Saints come down to the final play, whereas you look at the Seattle Seahawks matchup against the Saints, and it was a 44-13 final. That was one of my factors into making this pick. Although I will say this for Seattle, I don't think they score 30 points for the 3rd week in a row. I think that comes to an end. But I still have them getting the win in this one, 23-16. So thank you guys for listening. Week 4. We'll be back for Week 5 on Mr. Thursday Night. Stay tuned for that. Friends, get your scores in. And I'll see you guys next week when the 2 other teams from the NFC West play each other on Thursday Night Football.